Welcome to the Marine Sailing Club Learn to Sail program for Session 4. These videos provide an introduction of information that you'll be covering with your instructor during class. Session 4 is where it all comes together. Today we're going to talk about putting it all together, which means combining all the things you've learned at Learn to Sail so far. We're also going to talk about the weather, how to determine what the weather is going to be, what are safe conditions for sailing, and how to check on the weather and the wind while you're at the lake. We're also going to do some of the more advanced skills together, where we're going to talk about the person in water drill, which is how you would use a drill to help get a partner who was on your boat, maybe who fell overboard, or maybe to recover your hat if that fell overboard. We're also going to talk about capsize recovery, which is how to get back in the boat if you fall overboard. Finally, we're going to start talking about how to start sailing on your own. What kinds of things you should be thinking about as you begin your sailing outside of Learn to Sail. And then we'll wrap up by talking about how to complete this course. So far in Learn to Sail, we've talked a lot about the individual parts of sailing a sailboat. How to tack, what the points of sails are, how to jibe, those sorts of things. But now we need to start thinking about putting it all together. So here, on one page, I've tried to summarize the key things that I would like you to remember as you start putting it all together. These are the very most important points of our Learn to Sail program. Let's start with, whenever you're going out in a boat, always wear a PFD. Next, hopefully it's clear by now that you cannot sail into the no-go zone. That's a zone about 90 degrees wide, maybe into the wind plus or minus 45 degrees. While you can't sail in that direction, it is useful, as you found out last session, in heading into that session, into the no-go zone when you are trying to dock. That's a way to slow your boat down as you approach the dock. Also, I recommend that while you're learning to sail, you don't cleat in the main sheet. Keep it in your hand. That way you can let it out or pull it in whenever you need to. When you have some more sailing experience, then you can start thinking about cleating in your main sheet. For now, usually cleating in the main sheet is just a way you get into trouble. I'd like you to remember that you always want to point the bow of the boat, that's the front of the boat, into the wind before you raise the sail and while you're trying to lower the sails. If you have the boat pointed some other direction, it's just going to cause problems. I'd like you all to practice your knots. Tying good knots is not only safe, it makes it more fun and more enjoyable while you're out on the water. In particular, make sure you are really good at tying the bowline knot, the stopper knot, and a cleat hitch. When you're sailing upwind, there's a few things to remember. Look at boat A in the diagram. It's sailing upwind. When you're sailing upwind, you want to have the boom in closer to the middle of the boat, but not any closer really than the back corner of the boat, maybe about in the position where boat A is right now. Once you have the sail in about the right location, remember I recommend to use the ease, luff, trim approach. What that means is while you're sailing, maybe every couple minutes, you're going to ease out on the main sheet, letting the sail take a little bit of that line from you. Keep easing out until you see the leading edge, which is called the luff of the sail. The leading edge of the mainsail will start to luff. As soon as it starts to luff, pull in just a little bit until it stops luffing. That's the second step. Ease, and then it luffs, and then pull it back in or trim it until it stops luffing. As soon as it stops luffing, you have the sail correctly set in order to sail upwind. Sail that way for a few minutes and then try it again. You've probably figured it out by now that if you're going to tack, which is turning the bow of the boat through the wind, you need to have a little bit of speed already going before you start to go into that tack. And if for some reason while going through the tack, your boat gets stuck in irons, pointed bow into the wind, remember the Superman technique we talked about to get out of irons. Grab a hold of the tiller and the boom and push them both either away from you or pull them both towards you. Hold them there until the boat backs up, turns direction, and starts sailing again. When you're sailing downwind, you'll have the boom farther out, sort of like the position B boat off to the side here. You'll also want to be careful when you're sailing downwind to avoid accidental jibes. That's where you turn the boat and suddenly and unexpectedly the sail will go from one side of the boat to the other side of the boat. And also, when you are going downwind, if you decide you're going to jibe, sheet in before you jibe. Pull that mainsail and boom a little bit closer to the middle of the boat, then start your jibe, and as the sail comes across the boat, immediately let out so that the boom can run freely out on the other side of the boat. Probably the most two important things to think about while you're on the lake: when in doubt, let it out. If the gust of wind comes or the boat starts to tip, just let out some main sheet and get that boat to settle right back down. And you'll also want to remember the safety position. We talked about that in the last session and you had a chance to practice it. Safety position is a great way to take a short breather on the lake. To get into safety position, start on a close reach where you're sailing a little bit up towards the wind. And then, while you maintain that same direction of sail, let out on the jib and let out the main sheet and allow those sails to fluff or luff. At that point, the boat will start to slow down and you will have some time to fix things, take a drink of water, maybe retie your shoes, and when you're ready to sail, pull in the jib and pull in the main sheet and the boat will take right off on sailing. Monitoring the weather is really important if you're going to be a sailor. Before you even head out to the lake, you should get a weather forecast. Check online. I've recommended a few websites here as my go-to sites. I often use windy.com or windfinder.com. I check lightningmaps.org as a way to see real-time information on where there are nearby lightning strikes. And I also use Weather Underground as a tool to see what the predicted weather and wind speed and direction will be throughout the day. You'll want to be looking at the wind speed, the gusts, and the direction of the wind. If there's any storms or lightning headed your way, you always want to wear sunscreen, but you may want to check and see what the UV forecast is, just to see how often you'll need to reapply that sunscreen. And if you're sailing early in the year or late in the year, you may want to check and see what the weather temperature is, because when the water is cold, it can be very unpleasant if you end up in the water. Let's talk about lightning for a minute. If you see lightning, you want to get off the water immediately. You don't want to be on a lake filled with water with a boat that has a mast sticking up in the sky. A couple things to think about lightning. If you can hear thunder with that lightning, typically that means that the lightning is within 6 to 8 miles of you, maybe much closer, and you are in immediate danger. You need to get off the water. Also, if you are at the lake and there is a thunderstorm passing through, you should wait at least 30 minutes after the last lightning strike that you can see before you consider going back into the water. Don't want to mess with lightning. Once you reach the lake, you're going to still want to pay close attention to the wind. There's lots of ways to determine where the wind is, where it's going, and how fast it's going. One of the best ways is to watch the surface of the water for ripples. If the water is smooth, then the wind in that area is low. If there is a lot of ripples and the water looks a little darker, that means there's more wind there. You'll want to watch those wind patches as they travel across the lake. Then you'll be able to see the direction the wind is headed and get an idea of what the speed is as well. Other things you can pay attention to is watch the sails of other sailboats. By determining where their sails are blowing or where they're positioned, you can get a good idea of the direction and speed of wind where that boat is located. You can also watch tree branches, flags on the shore, even the clouds to get an idea of which direction and how fast the wind is blowing. Here I've included a couple pictures. Sometimes you may see white caps, where you have little white areas showing up at the peaks of the waves out on the lake. Usually white caps start forming maybe at 8 to 9 miles an hour of wind speed. There'll be just little ones here and there at first. As the wind continues to pick up, you'll see more and more white caps. If you look out in the lake and see lots of whitecaps everywhere and they're sort of sustained, it's staying that way, that means that the wind is at least 15 miles an hour, and that's pretty strong for sailing. If you see some flags, quick rule of thumb, if the flag is about halfway up, maybe at 45 degrees, that means the wind is about 10 miles an hour. And if you see the flag stretch straight out, that means the wind is closer to 20 miles an hour. That gives you a rough idea. As you gain more sailing experience, I hope you will decide to spend more time sailing outside of Learn to Sail. So here's some things to think about as you start sailing on your own. It's always a good idea to sail with a partner in the boat with you at first. It's best if you can find someone who is A, calm, and B, if they know a little bit at least about how to sail. When checking the winds, a good learning to sail wind speed, at least at first, is when the wind is probably 5 to 7 miles per hour. If you're going to be approaching a dock, you may also want to pay attention to the wind direction. The easiest return to dock will happen when the wind is blowing from the shore out towards the lake. That means as you approach that dock, you'll be sailing into irons and slowing down. When you start, you'll want to spend the first couple sessions, maybe several hours of sailing in total, sailing in that 5 to 7 mile an hour wind speed by yourself or with a partner. And then, after you're comfortable there, pick a day when the wind is maybe a little stronger, maybe 8 to 9 miles an hour, and go see how it goes. If it seems comfortable, maybe sail a few more sessions where the wind is 9 miles, 8 or 9 miles an hour before you decide to pick up another couple miles an hour. You should increase in small steps. It is significantly more difficult to sail at 10 miles an hour than it is at 7 miles an hour. And it is significantly more difficult to sail at 12 than 10. So increase in small steps. If you go to a new lake or switch to a new boat type, you'll probably want to drop back down to the wind speed a little bit, at least for the first couple times. And when you gain more experience, you may start thinking about single-handing. That is where you would sail the boat all by yourself. I will recommend that you get very, very comfortable sailing with a partner before you start to think about sailing single-handed on a boat that's larger than a sunfish. So let's spend a few minutes talking about a person-in-water rescue. This is a method that you can use to safely get someone or something that's fallen off your boat back onto your boat. The idea is quite simple. Some people refer to this as the figure 8 or quick return person-in-water rescue. But at some point, when the thing or the person falls off the boat, you want to head your boat directly onto a beam reach, shown here as figure number 1. You'll stay on that beam reach for several boat lengths. And at this point, remember, you're sailing away from that person, so you might want to tell them that you'll come back for them so they don't worry about it. But you want to sail on a beam reach several boat lengths to get a little bit of distance between you and that person in the water. Hopefully they have a life jacket on and they'll be fine until you get back to them. Once you've gone those several boat lengths, you'll want to do a tack, where you turn the bow up through the nose of the wind, and in this case you're going to keep on turning that boat until you're headed downwind from position 1 to 2 to 3 in this diagram. On that downwind run, you're going to want to slowly curve around and sail back up, pointing your boat into irons and coasting to a stop next to that person in water so that you can help them get back into the boat. This is a great way to recover something or someone that's fallen overboard. At our next session in the boats on the lake, we're going to practice the person in water drill. We're also going to be able to perform capsize recovery drills. This is where you will initially tip the boat over and then you will right the boat and climb back into the boat, getting good practice because sometimes when you're sailing, the boat is going to capsize. Let's quickly go over again the steps in doing a capsize recovery. First, as soon as everyone's in the water, you want to check and make sure that everybody is okay. Make sure that no one has hit their head or is wrapped up in the lines. Next, uncleat the sails. You want to make sure the main sheet and the jib, if you have one, are both uncleated. Now you divide up the jobs. If you have 2 people, Person 1 is going to swim around to the centerboard, while person 2 stays near the cockpit, and if there's no masthead float on this boat, they'll want to lift that gooseneck. You'll need to communicate, and you're going to need to communicate by shouting because it's probably windy and you're going to be on opposite sides of the boat for a little bit of time. The first person's going to shout, "I'm at the gooseneck," and then the person that swam to the centerboard is going to say, "I'm at the centerboard." When the first person hears that the rescuer is at the centerboard, they'll want to move over and start to get headed to be ready to go into the cockpit. And when they're ready, they're going to say, "I'm ready to be scooped." That's an indication to the person at the centerboard that they can pull down on that centerboard and flip the first person up into the boat. Person 2 gets scooped into the cockpit, and then person 2 will help person 1 into that boat. It's a great idea to practice, and it is part of the things you'll need to do to complete this course. As a reminder, here are the steps to complete the Learn to Sail class at Marine Sailing Club. First, you'll need to get a sign-off on each of the skills on your skills checklist with your instructor. You'll also need to perform a capsize recovery test. Let your instructor know when you'd like to perform that capsize recovery. And on that day, you're going to want to bring a towel or maybe a change of clothes because you're going to get wet. You also will need to get a sign-off on demonstrating your knots. There are 4 knots that you need to tie to complete this course: the bowline, the stopper knot or figure 8, a cow hitch, and a cleat hitch. And the last thing you'll need to do is to complete the written test. You can take the written test at the MTC building. There's practice tests available on the website if you want to see what the questions look like. Log in with your password and go to the Learn to Sail page. The test covers things like the points of sail, parts of a boat, rules of the road, that sort of thing, general sailing information. I hope you've enjoyed this series of videos from the Marine Sailing Club Learn to Sail program. I also hope that you're really enjoying learning to sail. If you have any questions about any of the things we've covered here or in the previous videos or previous classes, bring those up with your instructor. All of us at the instructing crew are there to help and to learn. We want you to have a safe time on the lake, we want you to have fun on the lake, and we want you to enjoy learning to sail. See you at the lake.